Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting version of Chip Talks Health. Today, we're going to discuss cannabis. We haven't talked about cannabis in a long time. It doesn't really matter if you're a supporter of cannabis or a non-supporter of cannabis. The points that we're going to talk about in this Chip Talks Health podcast are going to be important to you. So whether you support the issue or not, these points are going to be important because they really are points about all natural products, not just about cannabis. So if you're paying attention, again, natural products are something that the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry really don't want you to know about, right? We don't really have a good mechanism for proving natural products as helpful with your health. The FDA's got a drug development pathway for natural products. However, there's been thousands of drugs that have been put up that FDA pathway, and only two have been approved. Okay. So that's interesting. The FDA is well over 50% funded by the pharmaceutical industry. And so they really have a big conflict of interest when it comes to looking at things like cannabis or looking at things like 7-OH that is in kratom. Kratom has helped thousands and thousands of people get off opiates and transition from opiates into a more normal life. Yes, it probably needs to be studied more. And yes, it probably has some safety concerns. But at the same time, it doesn't have the same safety concerns as fentanyl or most opiates. And it's not going to kill you, likely. So I don't know that we know that for sure yet or not. But anyway, it's why it needs to be studied more. And it clearly has some evidence that it's much safer than something like fentanyl. And it certainly would be a safer transition type substance than like a Suboxone, right? So these natural products, and it's not just cannabis, but I'm going to use cannabis as kind of the framework to talk about everything that's going on. But it's really all natural products. So the FDA, stuck their nose in the kratom issue here over the last couple of months and, wants to ban 7-OH, which is the active in kratom, and the opiate, let's say, like thing in kratom that appears to be safer and appears to be much gentler, easier, and probably a better, honestly, pain reliever than opiates themselves. So anyway, there's all that. But we're going to talk about this from the lens of cannabis because my conclusions are kind of the same here of what I really think we need to do. And so I'll wait till the end to give you my thoughts and recommendation on kind of what I think we need to do here. But let's talk about cannabis a little bit. So again, cannabis is something that has been culturally, with the human race since ancient Egypt. Literally in China, before the written word, there was cannabis. Cannabis was, marijuana, ma, however you want to say it, but ma was what the ancient Chinese used to call it. And it's one of the first characters in their alphabet is the character for ma, which is, cannabis, marijuana. Now, I'm going to say cannabis. I might say marijuana, and I might say hemp. So let me tell you what all those things mean, and then you'll be able to decode Chip's, free thinking speech in a better way. So cannabis is the plant. That is what grows. That's what comes out of the ground. Cannabis sativa linus. It has several different branches, but cannabis is what comes out of the ground and what most of us refer to as the plant itself. If you take a cannabis plant and you analyze the amount of THC, which is the psychoactive drug that's in the cannabis plant, if you analyze the amount of THC in that cannabis plant, if it's less than 0.3, 0.5, it depends by state, but 0.3%, then it's going to be classified as hemp. So that cannabis, because it has less than 0.3% THC, would be called hemp. If it has more than 0.3% THC, we're going to call it marijuana. When I wrote Oklahoma's law, I had to refer to cannabis as marijuana because that's what we are legally regulating. When we look at something like Farm Bill 2018, we refer to cannabis as hemp because that is what we are legally regulating. So cannabis, when it's legally regulated, has two different names: marijuana and hemp, depending on the amount of THC in it. Again, is that a confusing, wonked out thing? Yeah, pretty much. And it's just another point of confusion, and kind of, let's say, cannabis regulation, because it all should be regulated together. There's no difference between hemp and marijuana as far as growing it, as far as testing it. The only difference is the amount of one constituent called THC. Okay, so that's the legal definitions of cannabis. But for the most part, I just call it all cannabis. When we're talking about laws, I'm going to talk about hemp laws and marijuana laws. And again, you now know the subtlety and the difference there. So all my life, so all the way back to the early 1970s, let's say, I've watched this issue. And I've watched the Democrats always embrace marijuana. So they embraced marijuana as a thing, in the 60s into the 70s. You had Democratic candidates who were running on a, marijuana platform, or had marijuana as part of their platform to legalize it. So we've been hearing those noises from the Democratic Party for a long time. The only action at a federal level that's ever happened as to marijuana was signed into law by Donald J. Trump. And that was Farm Bill 2018. And what Farm Bill 2018 did was it said, if you have cannabis that's less than 3% THC, we're going to call it hemp. And hemp, we're going to, for the most part, legalize around the country. So we're going to allow you to grow it. We're going to allow you to ship it to other states, provided they have a way to deal with it and they have that within their laws. And we're going to basically, make it legal. However, immediately after Farm Bill 2018 was signed, you had the FDA come out and say, whoa, wait a second. We just approved a drug that's a CBD-like thing called Epidiolex, and it's a drug. We're not going to let you put CBD everywhere. It might be unsafe, and it's a drug. We've approved it as a drug. You can buy it as a drug and put it everywhere with a prescription. But no, we're not going to let you do that. And further, we think it's unsafe, and we're not going to say that it's safe at all. So you had Coke and Pepsi ready to put, CBD products in every Walgreens, CVS, and, Walmart store in the country in October of 2018. And Gottlieb, who was the head of the FDA, came out with this statement, I think in early November, maybe late November of 2018, which just shut all that down. So basically, you had the U.S. Congress and President Donald J. Trump saying, we pretty much want to legalize hemp. We want to legalize marijuana as hemp. We want it to be freely accessible. States, you can write your own rules about how you regulate it, and if you really want it in your state. But we're gonna allow it to happen federally, and we're gonna move CBD from Schedule 1 to Schedule, I think, descheduled even. So I think it even is descheduled now. So that means it's safe, right? So that should have been a strong signal to the FDA to say, okay, we're going to support that. Here's our kind of new rules around that. Instead, no, they did the pharma thing. There is a pharma drug. So we're going to wall that off, and we're going to protect our buddies over here in pharma. And you're not going to have any natural products that mimic that drug. Okay? So that's why you don't have CBD products everywhere right now, is because of pharma objections and FDA's actions on pharma objections. Okay, so Farm Bill 2018 pretty much legalized hemp, but then you had the FDA just throw this wrench in the whole works that screwed everything up, and basically, now created all this nuance and created barriers, regulatory barriers for hemp to become accessible, let's say, by most people in the United States. So you've got that going on. Now that has existed. Now, when Biden was running for president, Biden specifically said he was going to deal with this issue, and he was going to move marijuana from a Schedule 1 substance to a Schedule 3 substance. And in fact, he took action to do this. He did that in 2024 in the summer, early spring, I guess, May of 2024. The DOJ basically published some rules, some actions that said we want to move marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. The DEA in August of 2024 basically noticed that they were going to have a formal hearing on that proposal. But by January of 2025, and this was right before Trump took office, the DEA postponed that hearing. So it's kind of just hanging in limbo right now. So you have had Donald J. Trump come out and say, hey, listen, I am going to do something on cannabis. And it's most likely that he is going to reschedule marijuana. So right now, the current state of everything is marijuana is on the Controlled Substances Act, which is what Nixon created in the 70s. He put marijuana on that Controlled Substances Act, and it is a Schedule 1 on the Controlled Substances Act. It's scheduled with heroin, boys and girls. It's basically, and what that schedule says is that it has no value to you as a medicine. It has no research value, and it's dangerous. Okay, so that's what it says. So like heroin, marijuana is classified in that classification, which is just ridiculous. Again, it's been around since before the written word in China. It's never killed anybody ever. And it's been, let's say anecdotally proven as safe. But anyway, that's kind of the status. That's where Nixon put it, and it has stayed there since then. Now, think about what that means. If you wanted to research cannabis back in, 10 years ago, well, you really couldn't. You could, but you had to go through a bunch of hoops, and you had to go special to University of Mississippi. You had to go through National Institute of Drug Abuse, and you had to file basically an application. They had to approve your application. Then maybe you got cleared to research this Schedule 1 narcotic. Okay. So, but money, NIH is not going to peel off a bunch of money to study something that is horribly dangerous, has no research value or no medical value. Are they? No, and they haven't. So the only NIH research on marijuana, cannabis that's happened has happened in Israel with your money. Okay. NIH has sent money to Israel to study this, and we don't get the results back, which sucks. But anyway, it's scheduled right now as a Schedule 1 narcotic. So that makes it, if you're a university professor and you want to go research marijuana, good luck as a Schedule 1 narcotic. And the hoops that you have to go through are just annoying and demotivating, let's say. So no one really wants to go out and pursue this as a research subject right now. So moving it from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, it moves it from kind of the status that heroin is in right now to more of a status of something like ketamine. So Schedule 3 says, it may have some medical value. It is certainly research worthy, and it may not be as dangerous as we thought it was. Okay. So that's a better place. That is not the proper place for cannabis. It probably should be descheduled. It's a plant. It's, clearly got value, and probably isn't dangerous, but we don't know that yet until we research it. So the next thing really that needs to be done is rescheduling marijuana, moving it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. Now, this is something that the Biden administration had started, but never followed through on. So the kind of the paperwork, let's say, is already in process for this. And it's a very easy thing for Trump to come along and just say, hey, I want to continue that. Let's go ahead and reschedule marijuana. And that's likely what he's going to do. And he's likely going to do that in the next couple of weeks. So literally, by the time you're hearing this podcast, this may have already been done. Okay. But the other thing that he's likely going to do is lay out a pathway to descheduling. So provided that we can study cannabis and we can study really the scary and harmful thing, let's say in cannabis, is THC. So everything else is safe. Everything else has been proven safe over many years, and everything else is just sort of, there's some drugs there. So CBD definitely is a really cool natural product that's already been descheduled. But, hemp and hemp hurd, and hemp as a fiber and as a building material is super valuable, and clearly that's safe. We were doing that up until the 40s, until the pharmaceutical industry got involved with the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and decided to ban marijuana and hemp because it has so much value, honestly, and it threatens the timber industry, it threatens the pharmaceutical industry, it threatens a lot of building materials that people make a lot of money on, so they don't really want it out there. So anyway, but moving it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 would allow us to research it. And as Trump announces this is likely what he's going to say is, we're going to take this intermediate step in order to research everything. Provided the research pans out, we're going to go ahead and take the next step, which is to legalize it. And legalization needs to happen. Here's the situation that we're in right now with most states. So you have 42, I think, states now have some kind of a cannabis marijuana type program. 42 out of 50. Okay. So clearly there's a giant majority here, but 42 states have some kind of program. Here in Oklahoma, we have a robust medical program. We have thousands of licenses of commercial operators. We have probably tens of thousands of jobs. We have billions of dollars associated with the industry here in Oklahoma. If we got the wrong president, or we got the wrong attorney general, they could come in and shut all of this down just like that. It's federally illegal. It's all federally illegal. So if the federal government wanted to be aggressive about enforcing the federal illegality of marijuana, they could do that. And that creates a very uncertain situation in the industry. Because if you're in that business, you know that any day, on any given Sunday, the US government could come in, raid you, and shut you down. And it doesn't really matter what your state says at all, at all, at all. Okay? So it becomes a big states' rights versus federal rights issue. But right now, if I'm a Wall Street guy, why in the world would I invest in a hemp business or a commercial cannabis business? It's so uncertain, right? It's still federally illegal, but yet states are defying the federal government and creating their own infrastructures. That seems risky, to say the least. That seems scary. That seems fraught with peril. That seems like there's a lot of things that could go wrong. No banking? You can't bank a business? No insurance or just new insurance products? Yeah, that's a little risky for me. I think I'll sit that one out. But as the federal situation changes, so as Trump reschedules marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, that creates a better situation as far as accounting. That signals to states that, hey, it's still going to be federally illegal as a Schedule 3. So it doesn't really change that, but it does signal that the federal government is moving in the right direction in kind of a pensive and careful way, but they're moving in the right direction, and that the next logical step should be to deschedule it or legalize it, kick it to the states, and let the states do what they're going to do with it. Okay. So that's the pathway that it looks like that we're on. But as MAGA, cannabis is a real weird thing. So if you're a cannabis activist, if you're in the cannabis space, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because it's purposely divided and fragmented. I can greatly decrease the power of, let's say, the marijuana movement, the cannabis movement, by dividing it. And the easiest way to divide it is create an issue like re or descheduling and let you guys divide yourselves. Well, I don't see it that way at all. I just see this as a progression. So the end point here is legalization, is descheduling, is however you want to look at it. But the end point is legalization of marijuana, because it needs to be legalized, and it needs to be, basically regulated potentially. So the THC side needs to be regulated. But again, everything else doesn't need to be, and it's just another agricultural product. So I think that's where we're headed. But again, because it's been so controversial and it's been so used as a political football, it's been used as a science football, it's been used as a pharmaceutical football, it's been used as an agricultural football. So because it's got all that narrative and funk around it, we just need to be careful. So I like what Trump is doing. I like rescheduling it. Let's go through maybe a period of 2 years or so where we're studying it. And then based on that study, let's make a decision on whether we fully legalize it, deschedule it or not, or deschedule part of it and keep THC, scheduled, something where basically the whole plant is accessible. But that is the path that we're on. Now, why is this important? This sets a precedent. So again, what's going to happen with the FDA around this? Well, now you've got something that everybody is clearly concerned about. Is there going to be a special pathway in the FDA for, medicinal cannabis type drugs? Because now we've said it's researchable. It does have some value. We can create drugs from it. So is it going to have its own pathway, or are they going to stick it in basically the botanical drug development pathway where, again, 2 out of a bajillion have gotten approved. So the chances of it getting approved as a drug are not real good up that pathway. Or does the FDA need to be retooled and reshaped? And that's what I think needs to happen. Again, there needs to be a whole new, and it doesn't have to be the FDA. It could just be a new division under HHS. FDA sits under the HHS in the administrative, let's say, hierarchy. Okay. So the FDA is a silo under HHS. But again, we need almost a natural products regulatory and development and kind of a oversight pathway that's different, because FDA is so conflicted with pharmaceuticals, and the biggest threat to the pharmaceutical industry is natural products. And so that's just not going to work. I mean, you have a huge conflict of interest in the FDA and a huge push, let's say, to not look at natural products or to demonize natural products or to marginalize natural products. And that's just kind of in the DNA of the FDA right now. So in order to change that, you'd have to just, lay waste really to the FDA. It's going to be better to have a natural products complete silo and effort, within HHS. And I think that's where we're likely going. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode of Chip Talks podcast. If you're interested in cannabis policy or you want to hear more of this, then leave us a note in the comments. Happy to do. I know a lot about cannabis policy. I do a lot on the back end for cannabis policy. I've written a lot of op-eds and position papers for a lot of candidates on cannabis policy. So I like this topic. I think it's an important topic. And I think it's a kind of a waypoint in our understanding of all natural products. So cannabis kind of is coming first, but there's going to be a host of other natural products that come along after that have great medical benefit, that are safe and all that. So anyway, important topic and an important hurdle, let's say, to knock down, an important windmill to tilt at. So that's what I do. Anyway, we'll see you guys back next week for another exciting episode of Chip Talks Health. Bye. See you later. Talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Chip Talks Health. If today's conversation on cannabis got you thinking, remember, this is just the beginning. I consult with patients and businesses on medical cannabis, speak nationally on the science of the endocannabinoid system, and I help formulate products designed to work with your body the way that nature intended. If you'd like to bring me in as a consultant, book me to speak, or learn more about formulations, head to TrueMedics.com. You can also connect with us locally at NeighborlyWellness.com. Stay watchful, stay curious, and I'll see you next time on Chip Talks Health.